Hello, and welcome back to another fun-filled episode of the Hammercast. I'm your host, Alex, the Hebrew Hammer Salkin, and today's a special episode for a few reasons. Number one, this actually has nothing to do with the episode, but I figured I would share it anyway because I'm very excited about it. I'm gearing up to head to jolly old England. I'm going to Birmingham, England for Black Sabbath's final show. And this is especially exciting for me because Black Sabbath, believe it or not, has been one of my favorite bands ever since high school. I still think that their first album is one of the best albums ever made. And if I'm not mistaken, I think my mom even went to go see Black Sabbath when she was young. So a love of Black Sabbath runs in the family. And unlike, Kiss, who've had like 10 farewell tours and stuff like that, Ozzy appears to be, right about at his sunset. And so this is actually factually their very last show. And when I aimed to buy a ticket, this would have been probably like in January when the tickets went on sale. I was like the 96,000th person in line online to get it. And very fortunately, a friend of mine whom I've known online from the calisthenics world as well as our mutual love of heavy metal, he told me that he had extra tickets. He and his wife go to concerts like all the time, and they fly all over the world to go to concerts. It's like one of their things that they really really love to do. And as luck would have it, he had tickets to Sabbath, and he had two extras, and he wanted to know if I would be willing to purchase them. And I, of course, said yes. And so a good friend of mine and I are about to head out tomorrow. And as of today, right now, it's July 1st as I am recording this. And so there you have it. There you be. Maybe I will do an update on how the Sabbath show was. If you're interested, drop me some sort of contact, and I will let you in on how it went. Now, before I go too deep into that, what I want to do today in particular is talk a little bit about something that's near and dear to my heart because a very monumental anniversary has passed. And as a matter of fact, it is the 14th anniversary of my falling head over heels for calisthenics training. And I had been interested in calisthenics training for a very long time, in the sense that I knew Bruce Lee, for instance, was really big into calisthenics, but I didn't understand exactly how to make it work for me. So um, I like this had to have been, I don't know, probably 2007. I read The Art of Expressing the Human Body by John Little. And in it, I read stories about how Bruce Lee could do up to like 51 arm chin ups in a training session. And I thought, yeah, that'd be cool to work up to like one arm chin ups. And, I, like anybody else, you think, okay, you just put in a little bit of practice, eventually get good enough, and there you have it. Well, as I started to get a little bit deeper into the world of strength training, I realized that it's not actually that simple, and it takes quite a bit more to really do any kind of feat of calisthenic strength or any feat of strength in general, even if it's with iron or what have you. So it was June, I think June 11th of 2011, either the 9th, June 9th, or maybe June 11th, but it was 2011. I remember this. Um, I had finally broken down and bought Pavel's DVD for The Naked Warrior. I had owned his book already for 3 years and I had read it many times. And when I was watching the DVD, there was something that he mentioned in there that he did not, inexplicably, never mentioned in the book. And it was the importance of the hollow position. And it was a few minutes into the DVD, like 10 minutes or less. And suddenly something clicked. I thought, well, I didn't know about this. And he's talking about how important this is for pistol squats and one arm push ups. Now, I had been able to do pistol squats for a very long time, but one arm push ups always eluded me. So I paused the DVD, went over to the middle of my room, and got down, got into the hollow position in the one arm push up position. I knocked out my first rep ever. And then I did the same thing on the other side. And I was like, it was like a veil had been lifted over my eyes. Like all of a sudden, I experienced the world in a completely different way because I was able to tap into strength that I already had but could not access. And I realized that it was by learning the tips, tactics, techniques, and strategies of authentic, old school calisthenics for strength and muscle and power and all these other great things that the sky really was the limit. And for the first time ever, I really felt like, kind of like Neo in the Matrix, I guess I would say, who were Like he has these moments where he gets, a knowledge of kung fu downloaded into him, and all of a sudden he's got these new and surprising abilities. It felt a little bit like that. Now, uh, moments like that only happen every so often where something like really clicks. You can't rely on those to happen every single training session, even once a year. I mean, those are like rare stars align kind of instances. But along the way, I've learned a lot of things through trial and error, as well as through agony and ecstasy of how to succeed in calisthenics training without really trying. Well, that's not true. You actually do have to try quite a bit. But it's a cool sounding title, so we're going to go with it. And I put together a list, and I want to make sure that I cover everything. This is in no particular order, but all of these things are going to be very, very important for you. And so the first one is that movability is key. Now, I like to use the term movability as sort of like a catch all for mobility, which is the ability to move a joint through its full range of motion using strength. There's flexibility, which is the ability to get into a position. And, you may not necessarily need strength to do it per se. Like it could be, the splits or whatever the case may be. And then also your ability to move just naturally. Like let's talk about, for instance, crawling and the original strength resets and things like this. The the better access you have to the natural movement your body is heir to, and the better you can control it, the easier it becomes to get to points where you can do one arm push-ups and pistol squats and advanced pull-up maneuvers and all sorts of cool gymnastics type of stuff. If you're not willing to do that, you can get away with that very often with like barbells and even to a certain degree with kettlebells. Not as much with doubles, but with singles, a lot of times you can do that. Uh, with calisthenics, I mean, if your body is the weight and the gravity is the resistance, uh, if you have even like minor insufficiencies, a lot of times it really, really throws you off. Like just a teeny bit less ankle dorsiflexion than what you need can keep you from doing pistol squats, just as one example. So this is really important. Your movement quality is huge for your calisthenics success. Now, number two would be to learn to feel the movement. And one of my favorite scenes in any movie is when Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon is teaching a student of his, and his student is kind of just going through the motions. And you can tell that he's trying to think his way through his response to Bruce Lee's attack. And Bruce tells him, don't think, feel. You need to be able to react. I mean, thinking is slow, but the feeling, that sort of like that instinct that you get about this is right, this is not right, this is what I should do, this is what I shouldn't do. It's every bit as important for calisthenics training and really iron training as well, but particularly calisthenics training where the nuances of not only your own individual build, but then also the technique that you would need to be able to perform on top of all that require you to really go beyond just thinking your way through the exercise. It's important to feel what feels more successful, what feels better, what doesn't. So you have to learn how to feel your way through the movement. Sometimes that's going to mean doing a variety of other different exercises as assistance work. Could mean a lot of different things, but it's highly, highly important. Now, the next thing is you want to seek help from people who have struggled, not the naturals. This is true around the board. This is very much true for people who, are naturals at, let's say, lifting or athletic, who have always been athletic. A lot of times they may be good coaches, but sometimes they're good coaches for people who are like them, and they can help those people to maximize their natural gifts. But if you're anything like me, you don't really have a lot of natural physical gifts to speak of. It's important to understand that number one, you can still achieve great things, but you are going to need to start from where you are and not from some sort of an idealized position where a lot of these very well-meaning trainers would have you start from. It's a recipe for frustration if you don't do that. So seek help from people who have not only transformed themselves, but have also proven that they can help it to transform others as well. Number four would be to embrace the foundations before tackling the advanced stuff. There's a story I've told many times before, but there's a gal who's been a long-time follower of mine, very strong. I mean, she could do Turkish get-ups with like 32 kilos, like not an amateur by any means. But she was a bit lagging in her push-ups at this time. This was quite some time ago, and she asked me like, I want to be able to work up to one arm push-ups. So can you write me a program for that? Well, the first thing I asked her is I said, well, how many regular push-ups can you do? And she said five. So what I told her was, the first thing that you're going to want to do is get that number to like a minimum of 20. Even better if you can do more than that. And we're talking like full range of motion push-ups. Because if you can't do more than five, of something that's very very foundational, it's inconceivable that you would be able to do like something far more advanced. Let's if you look at it like from the standpoint of, let's say, a kettlebell exercise. Let's say you say I want to do the snatch test, which for men is 100 snatches in 5 minutes with a 53-pound kettlebell or 24-kilogram kettlebell. For ladies, it's 16 kilograms, but it's the exact same, 12 to 16, depending on your size. And same numbers, same amount of time. But let's say right now you're like, well, you're a gentleman and you're like, well, I can do the 16 kilo for five on each side, but I want to be able to do it for 24. Well, the first thing to do would be to be able to do 100 with like the 16, and then maybe do 100 with the 20 kilogram or the 44 pound. And then after that, you can start thinking about doing it with 24. Now, with calisthenics, it's a little bit different because it's not purely just go up and weight, although you can do that. The other thing to consider is that you want, again, more foundational movements, ones that are simpler in technique, and the ones that have some complexity to them, like pistol squats and one arm push ups, where there are extra nuances to the technique in order to perform them. You're going to want to get really good at stuff like regular push ups, dips. Um, for pulling, I would say rows, face pulls, YTWLs. These are fundamental. For the lower body, hip thrusts with two legs, one leg, extended range of motion. I would also say, of course, full body weight squats, being able to sit in a resting squat for minimum of 5 minutes, but ideally, if you can get to 10 or even 20 minutes, that would be better. Uh, Lunges, being able to do double digits in lunges would be colossal help. Hamstring curls, all this stuff. And of course, all the different ab exercises you can think of. If you can do all this, and then you also add in things like crawling, hanging, climbing, if you're able to do it, dead bugs, again, all the original strength resets, it's going to have a huge, huge impact on your overall long term success. You need to have a strong foundation before you can try to build really, really high. All right. Number five is that tension is king, but relaxation is queen. The interesting thing about a body weight training is I actually don't there I mean it used to be considered kind of standard practice, or at least optimally it was considered standard practice for trainers to say, well, you should be able to do these body weight exercises before you add any weight to anything. And I don't think that's really the case. The fact is that Pavel Tsatsouline himself, the kettlebell king, has said that bodyweight training will teach you more about the discipline of strength training than any other discipline. But the corollary to that is that he's also pointed out that it is the one that requires the most coaching. So one of the things about the coaching is that if you get good at it, you can learn to generate tension from nothing, which is a like inestimably important skill to have for any strength feat. And it's especially fundamental for calisthenics training and has just an oversized impact and output on other iron disciplines or in other strength disciplines in particular. But you're going to also want to make sure that you can relax, because tension, of course, equals strength. But if you're always tense, it's going to negatively impact point number one, which is movability. So you want to make sure that you maintain your movability. It is super, super important. All right. And relaxation is key to that. So, yes, learn how to generate tension, but also make sure that you remember how to relax. Number six probably isn't going to win me a lot of friends, at least among certain colleagues of mine, but variety is the spice of gains. I think variety is especially important when you're doing the fundamental exercises. So let's go back to what I mentioned earlier, stuff like push ups, squats, lunges, hamstring curls, hip thrusts, all different types of ab movements, all different types of upper body pulling movements. Initially, you're going to need to put in a lot of volume or a lot of reps in order to get good. One of the perils of doing a lot of volume is that you end up potentially end up overtraining certain tissues, and that can, of course, be naturally the muscles, but then also the tendons and the ligaments, and then you might undertrain others. So, a very simple way to mitigate the effects of this higher volume is to simply do more variety. One of the things that I do when I practice pull-ups, for instance, is every single set I just change my grip. So I might do underhand, and then I'll do neutral grip, and then overhand. I might sometimes do more strict gymnastics style. Other times I'll do a little bit more of a lean back, and then come back through with like, let's say, a standard pull-up variation. Other times it's strict lean back, like bodybuilder style. And the same thing goes with the lower body. If I'm doing lunges, I might do walk forward walking lunges, and then Cossack lunges, and then curtsy lunges, all sorts of different stuff like this. It's very, very important when you get to the higher levels. Let's say you're trying to work your way toward a one arm push up. Well, then you're going to need to consolidate your efforts into that one specific direction. But for the most part, you should be spending time as time goes on getting good at a variety of different versions of each of the major exercises. You don't need like 20 or 30, but even like, two, three, five variations of these exercises. If you're reasonably good at them, it goes a very long way. And it also develops your body to look like you get a really nice physique from it as well, for reasons that are not germane to this topic. Number 7 would be moderate intensity plus frequency plus volume equals success. Now, much like kettlebells, your body weight is ostensibly a fixed weight. Now, of course, you can eat a little bit too much, you can eat not enough, and so your weight can certainly change. But the one of the things that's very important is that people have a tendency to want to go all out all the time, or go a little bit too hard. Some people can handle the intensity and they don't burn out, and as a matter of fact, they do very well on it. But you'll know if that's you. And if you've had a lot of fits and starts in your training, it's probably not you. I always find that the more I focus primarily on light and moderate training, but with a decent frequency, and then periodically I'll go a bit heavier and I'll lower the volume, that seems to work very well. And the frequency is also important. And it may not mean 5 days a week. Maybe you only get in 2 days a week, and if that's the case, you can still absolutely make some really great gains. But um, frequency does help if you can manage it, and a volume is really big, particularly if you're kind of just getting started. You just need a lot of practice to get good at uh, any movement, whether it's push-ups or lunges or pull-ups or whatever the case may be. You need to build up the volume, and you want to keep it moderate enough where you can keep coming back and keep making gains. Number 8, progressions mean nothing without prerequisites. Now, this kind of harkens back to what I talked about earlier when I talked about the gal who asked about the one arm push ups, and she was a little deficient on her regular push ups. Um, a lot of people ask me, what's a good progression for, say, one arm push ups or pull ups or what have you? And, the first thing I'll tell them is, well, let's say pull ups. If you can't hang for at least 30 seconds, pull up, it's still possible, but it's going to be a lot harder than it needs to be. Similarly, if you can't do body weight rows at a pretty generous angle and you can't hold a hollow position on the ground for, let's say, at least 30 seconds, you just don't have enough prerequisites in place to really justify the wailing and gnashing of teeth that you're going to go through to try to accomplish for your first pull up. So, what you really need to do is think about breaking a lot of these exercises up into parts. So, I gave you some examples right there for the pull up. You got rows. Again, I think YTWLs are great. Similarly, anything for the abs is very helpful, but hollow position has a very nice direct carryover. Hanging naturally would be huge. The same thing would go for, let's say, like a lunge, or let's say with pistol squat. Like you want to accomplish a pistol squat. How long can you stand on either leg? How long can you stand in a kneeling position with knee on the ground and minimal help from the front foot? Let's say, are you wobbling all over the place, or are you stable? Because if you're wobbling all over the place, it's a sign that you don't have very good stability, and in all likelihood, you need to spend a little bit more time on that. Similarly, can you do a deep lunge? And I don't mean a lunge till about the halfway mark. I mean, can you lunge all the way down until your hamstrings touch your calves? If you can do stuff like this and you can do it without needing to put anything underneath your foot, you're setting yourself up with great prerequisites to be able to do full pistol squats. If you don't do it, it's still possible to work your way toward it, but it's going to be a lot more work. It's going to be probably a lot more complicated programming. If you want to keep it simple, just get really good at the prerequisites. Uh, your mileage may vary in terms of how long that will mean that you have to put the time in before you can start working on the progressions. But if you just try to skip right to progressions and you don't have any of the prerequisites in, it's just you're not going to have a lot of fun, and it's sort of going to, I think, muddle your calisthenics journey. It won't be as enjoyable as it could be, and that's kind of a shame. Number nine would be you should also lift weights as well. Now, there are plenty of good reasons to do only calisthenics training for a period of time. I know that Jason Ferrugia, who's a very well-known strength coach, has talked about, at least once a year, he'll only do calisthenics training, and it always does great stuff for his body. And so there are plenty of reasons to do that. But uh, your body is made not just to move through free space with strength, which is ultimately what calisthenics is, but it's also made to move other objects through free space. Now, I'm very partial to kettlebells in particular, but dumbbells, barbells, sandbags, any sort of external object is really, really good for helping to complement your calisthenics training. In much the same way that you might tell, an iron fanatic, hey, you should try tossing in some calisthenics work. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. So you should also learn how to lift weights, and again, learn from somebody who's competent, preferably somebody who struggled, overcame it, and has helped other people to overcome it. And what you're probably going to find is that you're going to make faster progress, not only with your calisthenics, but you might notice too that that sort of functions as a little bit of a prerequisite in a certain sense. So you may find stuff like, let's say, if you want to start working your way toward handstands, but you never do military presses. But military presses are a lot less complex to learn and a lot less complex to do than stuff like pike push-ups and things like that. So that's the sort of a thing that, again, it can lay the groundwork for improved calisthenics strength, and it can fast track you to your progressions that you are coveting. And if you skip over it, again, you can still get to where you want to go, but you don't learn as much about yourself along the way, from my experience. So highly recommend that you lift weights as well. Number 10 would be to use iron game tactics whenever possible. And what I mean by this is that there are a lot of people who are big calisthenics fanatics who they think that programming for calisthenics is like completely different than it is for iron. And there are big differences. Like, for, if you know anything about barbell training, and you know about like linear periodization, where it's like you just add 5 pounds here, 10 pounds there, and you keep doing it until you've got to reduce total number of reps you're doing until you hit a PR. You can't really do that so easily with calisthenics. It's just not feasible. You do have to use different approaches, ideally those which are more volume based, but there are other things that are very, very important that you can do from the jolly old game of taming iron that you can similarly do with calisthenics. Again, programming is one of it. I think it's too big of a discussion to have on just this call alone, or this podcast alone, rather. But um, learning how to add, let's say, for on the programming side, I will say this: adding reps slowly and let's say modestly each week, as opposed to trying to just bang out as many as you can. Another very big one that I think is mission critical is rep tempo. It's not the end all be all, but if you want to get good at building strength and building muscle, you owe it to yourself to control as much as you can your movement through that free space, because ultimately that's what calisthenics is. It's moving with strength through free space. And if you're constantly racing through everything and you don't slow down the lowering phase and you don't try to use maybe an explosive lifting phase, you're just kind of bouncing and using momentum and all this other stuff, you'll still make gains, but it likely will not be as fast as it would be if you were to slow things down, add a pause here and there. Things like this go a very, very long way. So, in addition to getting quality programming that moves you meaningfully toward your goals, also making sure that you are utilizing some of the things that are staples in bodybuilding and powerlifting and just general weight training can go a very long way for your calisthenics strength as well. Now, number 11, again, probably not going to win me a lot of friends and fans and that sort of a thing, but to me, this is just obvious, and it wasn't always the case, but it has become the case lately. You should do some basic bodybuilding. And this goes for even if you're a kettlebell fanatic, because compound exercises are great, but by their nature, they're definitely going to require that you use several different muscle groups at the same time. But there are going to be some muscle groups that just get a bit more of the stimulus from the exercise. So let's take a military press for kettlebells, for instance. your shoulders and, to a certain degree, your triceps are going to get the majority of the work. Your chest will get some work for sure, but your medial deltoid is not going to work as hard as your the anterior or the front deltoid, the front side of the shoulder. This is the same for like push-ups, for dips, the medial deltoid, anterior, or I'm sorry, the posterior deltoid, the back of the shoulder, rotator cuff. These are muscles that don't really get the kind of overload that they need from just the compound exercises alone. It's not to say that they don't get worked or they don't get used, but they don't get overloaded to such a degree that they can keep up with the strength gains of the primary muscle groups that are moving you through free space. So, posterior or the rear deltoid, let's say, for rows, pull-ups definitely gets used. But if you do a little bit of, let's say, rear delt flies with some dumbbells, they don't have to be very heavy. They could be relatively light. Do, one or two high-ish rep sets at the end of your workouts. Likewise, medial deltoid. When I started working my medial delts, not only did many of my shoulder issues start to go away, but I started getting compliments on how my shoulders looked. It was like it was a side effect because I just wanted to be able to train without any sort of pain and agony. But that shoulder external rotations, similarly for the lower body, one of the reasons I'm a big fan of hamstring curls is just they've done wonders for my knees. Likewise with all of my students. Calf raises are spectacular. Again, great for the knees, but they're also very, very good for performance. They help a lot with pistol squats, hip thrusts. Not really, I guess not a super isolation type movement, but I guess it does fall into the bodybuilding category because it's usually used for, building up the glutes. All these and other things work wonders at helping to fix the weak links that kind of sneak their way in from your otherwise dedicated practice. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention those things and just put aside your distaste for the glossy magazines and the dudes in bikini bottoms posing on them. Bodybuilding is still and always will be very, very important, particularly for making sure that you are not just aging gracefully, but you are actually remaining resilient. So as you get older, you are still as strong and as powerful as ever. You just don't want a bunch of brittle, joints that just aren't well protected because the muscles surrounding them go from really strong to pretty strong to like absolutely weak. It's a recipe for disaster. I've had enough of my own fair share of issues as a result of that. And I'm a devotee of some basic bodybuilding. It's never my main focus, but almost always finds its way in. And this is the reason why. Now, number two, this just, goes right along with it is to bulletproof your joints. Honestly, if you're doing the bodybuilding stuff that I suggested and you're being relatively modest with it, you want to keep the goal, keep your calisthenics and your kettlebell training your main focus, but do a little bit of the bodybuilding goes a long way. Stretching, mobility work, odd angle training, like all this stuff goes a long way to help make sure that you can move your joints through their full range of motion the way that they're meant to, and you can do so with strength. And then the other thing too is don't be afraid to utilize stuff like when you need it, like isometrics. Not something that a lot of people really train with as much anymore, but is still a fantastic way of getting stronger, and it can have a very positive impact on your tendon and ligament strength. Anything you can do to bulletproof the joints is going to be very, very important. So part of that, of course, is strength training as you know it. Bodybuilding, as I previously mentioned, movement training is very good. And then sometimes you got to get a little bit crafty and do some old school stuff like isometrics. 13 would be to alternate times of pure strength and for muscle building. The wisest man who ever lived, King Solomon, wrote in Ecclesiastes, to everything there is a season. And this is the exact same thing with strength versus muscle building. The chief difference, let's say, what I'm just going to paint with a very broad brush, would be for pure strength, you would leave quite a few reps in the tank. Like if you could do 10 reps with a given weight, you might only do like 3 to 5 reps. And you want to do a lot of sets like that. You're trying to train your nervous system to get very efficient at the movement so that it's easier to lift that weight for even more repetitions. Whereas with muscle building, you want to push a little bit closer to the limits. So again, let's take that same weight that you could do 10 reps with and not a single rep more. And maybe you do sets of 8 with it rather than 3 to 5. That will build strength and it will also build muscle. And The more muscle you have, that means the more contractile tissue you have, and that means that in time, the more weight you can lift. There's a shelf life for everything. So only taking the muscle building approach or only taking the strength approach, eventually, your results can slow down. So if you alternate between the two over time, it's a very, very good way of just having this long-term career, just this perpetual progress. Tommy Kono did this. It was, if you don't know who he is, one of the greatest Olympic lifters, if not the greatest Olympic lifter ever to live. I don't have his stats with me right now, but I mean, he was world champion in multiple weight classes. I think he was an Olympic gold medalist in Olympic weightlifting for several years in a row between the 40s and the 50s. When he was not training, when he finished an Olympic lifting competition, he would drop out all Olympic lifting and then he would just go to just bodybuilding, and he would do like pure bodybuilding for several weeks or several months until he was going to gear up for another Olympic lifting meet. And incidentally, he also won bodybuilding competitions like left, right, and center. So he's a perfect example of alternating between pure strength and that vain but cool looking muscle that all of us won't admit that we want, but we really secretly do. I highly recommend that you give yourself permission to do that. Alternate between the two. Right? Again, go back to what King Solomon said: to everything, there is a season. And finally, you just have to enjoy the process. I am as guilty of this as anybody else. You want results like yesterday, and you get very impatient. But the fact of the matter is that the fastest way to get results is to just keep showing up. Even if you can't do your entire workout as written, if you can even just do one working set of the exercises you have on your list of things to do, may not be everything that you wanted to do, but if you're staying consistent, you are going to keep seeing results. And as time goes on, it gets a lot easier to never miss a workout. But initially, I would say, especially if you're a beginner, try to make like your first 6 months where you just never miss a workout. That doesn't mean that you complete the workout perfectly the way it was written, because that's a very tall order for most of us to do. But even if it means just showing up for 5 minutes, doing one thing that you had on the schedule, and making sure that you are never leaving a training session without laying down another brick in the structure that you are trying to build, you're going to feel a lot more empowered to just keep showing up, giving yourself excuses to succeed rather than to fail. And eventually, it'll be harder not to exercise than it is to muster up the energy to exercise. So there you have it. There you be. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if you have, I highly encourage you to like, subscribe, share with your friends. As my friend Pat Flynn likes to say, share with both of your friends. And let me know if you have anything else that you would like me to address more regularly on the show. I would be all too happy to do that. I don't remember if I mentioned this or not, but I've also got a great free program called the 9-Minute Kettlebell and Bodyweight Challenge, which is based around some of the stuff that I talked about in here. Actually, is very foundational movements around the gait pattern. So strengthening your walking pattern through stuff like crawling, loaded carries, type of things that are technically just super easy to learn. I mean, it takes like 30 seconds, if even that, to learn the movements. It's not just those two. There's a total of four, but learning those movements goes a very long way in helping you to connect your body from head to toe, making a great deal of other kettlebell and strength movements in general much, much easier. I've gotten great feedback over the years from this, and you can get a free copy. It's digital, so you'll get the access to it immediately. Just go to 9minutechallenge.com. There's also going to be a link in the description/show notes. You can click there, and you can grab your own copy. But I highly recommend that you toss it into your regular training, which is what it's meant for. It's not meant to take the place of your regular workouts, but rather to be added into it, either as a finisher, warm up, in between day sort of a thing. However you want to apply it. But then keep me posted on how it goes, because I'm always amazed at the stories I hear. Like, people lose a bunch of weight, people hit all sorts of PRs in their kettlebell and calisthenics training. Their body starts to feel like it's healing, and a lot of times their long-term issues kind of start to dry up, and it's just because they weren't moving their body the way that they were supposed to. And it's not a panacea, but it can do a lot for you. So 9minutechallenge.com. Check it out. Let me know how you like it. Thank you again for tuning in. I'll let you know how the Black Sabbath show went. And as always, have fun and happy training.